Hey, sixth graders. So this next section takes us from the late 50s and 1960s up through the advent of rock and roll and its use in musicals, and brings us right up into the 1970s and early 80s with a combination of Hal Prince and Stephen Sondheim.
The late 1950s and early 1960s produced some of Broadway's most memorable musicals. Gypsy, starring Ethel Merman as an overbearing showbiz mother.
Well, you'll be great. Gonna have the whole world on a plate.
Bye Bye Birdie, a parody of Elvis Presley and the dangers of rock and roll. That same season, Carol Channing starred in the nostalgic Hello, Dolly.
Look at that crowd up ahead. Pardon me if my old spirit shows.
So I want to pause here and throw in a quick snapshot of Carol Channing with some of our cast from the show Hello, Dolly that we did in 2006, and then a quick little video recording that she did to the cast and crew and to the audience before our show that we played each night. She was a remarkable lady, remarkable performer, passed away just last year. So we're really honored to have been able to have met her and have her do this for Gananda.
With love and appreciation to the cast and crew of Gananda.
Channing was followed by a parade of musical theater legends in the title role. Pearl Bailey, Ethel Merman, and Mary Martin, who brought the show to Vietnam to entertain American troops. But the biggest hit of 1964, which broke the record for the longest-running show in Broadway history, was perhaps the most unlikely. Fiddler on the Roof.
If I were a rich man, all day long I'd biddy bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. If I were a pretty rich,
This is Zero Mostel starring in The Fiddler on the Roof. Modern Broadway shows are often about the stars as well as the story, and so people like Zero Mostel and Carol Channing, as well as today actors and actresses like Kristen Chenoweth, Idina Menzel, Matthew Broderick, Nathan Lane, are really the stars that people go to shows to see.
We didn't realize it at the time. It was the sunset of the old-style Broadway musical that came in with Rodgers and Hammerstein. The opening number, Tradition, was actually about the closing of an era of the Broadway musical. The curtain rose on Fiddler, but it came down on that kind of show.
It was really the advent of rock and roll that pushed Broadway musical out of the mainstream of American culture, because up until then, Broadway music had been the top 40, the top 10 hit parade music of the country, and that started to change. And by the late 1960s, it was a done deal.
Hello, Dolly. This is Nurse Dolly.
In May 1964, Louis Armstrong's rendition of Hello, Dolly spent a week at the top of the charts, breaking the Beatles' run of 3 straight months.
You keep blowing, still growing, you still going strong.
It was one of the last times in the 20th century that Broadway had a #1 hit song.
Well, the culture is definitely shifting, but Broadway was basically trying to ignore the 60s.
By 1967, the war in Vietnam and the protests against it were polarizing the country. Two young actors, Jerome Ragney and James Rado, seized upon that friction as the storyline for a new musical production.
Vietnam was a major plot point in the show, but the war wasn't really the main thing. The main thing was the lifestyle. It seemed to be more about hippies, you know, growing their hair long and living in wearing different kind of clothes.
Gimme head with hair, long beautiful hair, shining, gleaming, steaming, flaxen, waxen.
The show Hair was really about making a statement against the military, which had a policy back then of shaving the heads of those who came to serve. So by growing long hair, they were defying the government.
The show was called Hair. It was the first Broadway musical with an entire score of rock music.
I'd never seen a Broadway musical when I wrote Hair. I like funky music. So that was sort of, and then when they said, well, we want a rock and roll score, I said, well, to me, that's what I do.
Every singer, dancer, hippie, panther, you name it, we were all online waiting to audition for this show. And we went into a series of rehearsals like I'd never seen before, unlike any other theatrical show I think I've worked on.
We starve, look at one another, short of breath, walking proudly in our winter coats, wearing smells from laboratories, facing our dying nation.
Hair ran on Broadway for 4 sold-out years. Along with its enduring hit songs, the show helped to establish the world of off-Broadway and Joe Papp's public theater as important new players in the development of the commercial musical.
Another 100 people just got off of the train and came up through the ground, while another 100 people just got off of the bus and are looking around at another 100 people who got off of the plane and are looking at us who got off of the train and a plane in the bus maybe yesterday. It's a city of strangers, some come to work, some to play, a city of strangers.
It really wasn't until Steve Sondheim came along with Company that somebody was able to take all the stuff that had happened before, the Rodgers and Hammerstein influence, the director influence, the choreographer influence, all that stuff, and morph into something new that sort of said, okay, that's that, now we're into another.
By the end of the 60s, Stephen Sondheim had collaborated on 6 Broadway shows. He followed up his lyric writing for West Side Story with another landmark, Gypsy, and then wrote both music and lyrics for a string of shows, including A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. In 1970, Sondheim teamed up with Hal Prince on Company and plunged the musical into a new era.
Probably the major thing that made Company controversial was that there was no plot. The audience kept waiting for a plot.
We played with nonlinear storytelling. Obviously, I had preceded it with cabaret, which was both linear and nonlinear. Now we made our way right into a whole nonlinear evening.
Pardon me, is everybody here? Because if everybody's here, I want to thank you all for coming to the wedding. I appreciate you going even more. I mean, you must know it's a better thing to do and not a word of what you call. I'm Paul, you know the man I'm going to marry, but I'm not because it wouldn't ruin anyone as wonderful as he is.
Thank you all for the gifts and the flowers. Thank you all. Now it's back to the showers. Don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today.
The cast of Company inhabited an abstract urban world and rode a working elevator within Boris Aronson's Jungle Gym set. The show's songs did not emerge from scenes as in traditional musicals. Instead, they provided commentary on the characters or their situations.
And this was an important step in the Broadway musical where these character shows that talk about each character and we listen to how each character feels and how they interact with each other, set the groundwork for shows like Rent and Wicked and Hamilton today.
Musicals for decades have had no doubts about if you find the right person, you may go the rocky road of love, but it would always lead to a so-called happy ending. We were saying something ambiguous, which is actually there are no endings. It keeps going on, is what really Company's about. And a happy ending can have a lot of people dead, like West Side Story, but it's still a happy ending.
By the early 70s, New York City, like the rest of America, was in a deep recession. And nowhere was that more evident than on the Great White Way.
This area in the 70s was a sewer.
The 1970s was a tough time for Broadway. They were really dealing with the advent of rock and roll, still growing from the 1960s, and this terrible recession where a lot of people didn't have jobs and a lot of businesses closed, and trying to find out how they could be successful.
What Broadway needed was a hit. This time, it would come not from a big-time star, but from the supporting cast, the dancers, the self-titled gypsies who provided the backbone of a musical. It was a former gypsy who reinvigorated Broadway, making dance so popular that leg warmers became a fashion statement. Michael DeFelia first appeared in a touring company of West Side Story, but on Broadway, he became known as Michael Bennett.
I met Michael on Hullabaloo, a TV variety show, in 1964. One day, we're dancing side by side, and we're bringing the jerk to new heights, and I say, Michael, what are you gonna do when you grow up? You can't keep doing this the rest of your life. Did you ever think of that, huh? And he said, yes, I'm gonna be a choreographer. And I went, oh, good luck. Don't forget about me.
Bennett got his first job choreographing on Broadway in 1966. He went on to stage dance numbers in Company and, with Hal Prince, co-directed Sondheim's next musical, Follies. In 1973, Bennett began to work on his own show. Without any pre-existing story, he held a series of workshops where he tape-recorded dancers talking about their experiences.
When we started a chorus line, it was called the Dancers Project, and it was a secret. We would start every day with a blank page, and our lives were a part of the process.
You know, this was the first time there was such a thing as a workshop, and we were young guys, and we were all just desperate to put on something very special, very new. All we talked about is let's do something on Broadway like they've never seen before.
Again. Step, kick, kick.
With backing from Joseph Papp, Bennett spent an unprecedented 18 months developing the musical. A plot line emerged about dancers auditioning for a part in a new show.
That connects with turn, turn, out, in, jump, step, step, kick, kick, leap, kick, touch. Got it? Going on. 5, 6, 7, 8, a turn, turn, touch.
In the beginning, there was a very difficult balance between making this about dancers but not making this about dancers.
A 5, 6, 7, 8, and turn, touchdown.
At what point can you get away from the dancer metaphor and get into the world of we're all on a line? We're all in this together.
Who am I anyway? Am I my resume? So many faces all around, and here we go. I need this job. Oh God, I need this show.
That did not happen until one day in rehearsal that Michael Bennett took a chalk and went wham and drew a line on the floor. And he said, that's the line. We're all on the line.
And so Chorus Line became a show about the characters, about the story of each individual dancer trying to get a job in this chorus line. And the set was just what you see. It was a white line across the stage and mirrors in the background that you would find in like a ballet studio. And that was it for the entire show.
Well, now the common denominator of all these people is, God, I hope I get it. I hope I get it. Well, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
I think like now I'll never make it. I'll never make it. He doesn't like the way I look. He doesn't like the way I dance. He doesn't like the way I...
Everyone has dreams and hopes, and there was something in that show for everybody. Men who were just retired would write me letters and say, your character made me go out and start a new business. Football players would say, the line. They would talk about the line, being on the line.
Most dramatically, for the show's finale, Bennett transformed a classic Broadway kick line into a bittersweet comment on the life of a dancer.
Singular sensation, every little step she takes. One thrilling combination, every move that she makes.
You had an entire, 2 hours talking about these individual people and that all this torture they have to go through to get a job, to be on Broadway, is to be in an assembly line. That was the genius of Michael. He gave the audience what they expected. What he meant was something else.
A chorus line opened at the Public Theater and quickly moved to the Schubert on Broadway in July of 1975. It stayed there for over 15 years, breaking all existing box office records.
Michael Bennett and the chorus line totally changed the musical theater. It really saved the financial fortunes of the Schubert organization. It was a catalyst for the improvement of this area. And of course, this area now is the most desirable area in New York.
I saw a chorus line at the Schubert Theater in Chicago. I was in the last row of the last balcony. I saw the show. I went back to my dancing school, to my teacher, and I said, you've got to teach me to do turn, turn, out, in, jump, step, which was in the opening combination. 2 years later, I auditioned, I got the show, and I went on tour with the show. And when I went on the first time, and I was doing the opening combination, and I remember thinking to myself, I wonder who's in the back row. True story.
I was younger then.
Tell him what I see.
I am in a tree, I am 10. I am in a tree.
I was younger.
Just a fun fact, this is Sab Shimano, who went on to play Lord Nornago in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
In 1976, during the celebration of the country's bicentennial, Stephen Sondheim and Hal Prince were exploring the dark side of American imperialism in Pacific Overtures. Set in 19th century Japan, John Weidman's story was told by an all-male Asian cast in a kabuki style.
If it happened I was there, I saw everything. I was someone in a tree. Tell him what I see.
It was a daring, courageous thing we did, and we were extremely proud of it, and it was a success. It was a flop, but it was a success.
Throughout the 70s, Sondheim and Prince defied the optimistic conventions of the musical. Theatrical nostalgia turned bitter in Follies. And an operetta scored in three-quarter time, A Little Night Music, was fraught with anxiety. In 1979, they adapted the unthinkable into a Broadway musical. It was a tale of slaughter and cannibalism set in 19th century London, featuring the murderous barber, Sweeney Todd.
I thought it would be fun to see if you can scare a contemporary audience the way movies can scare you.
Attend the tale of Sweeney Todd. His skin was pale and his eye was hard. He shaved the faces of gentlemen who never thereafter were heard of again. He trod a path that you have trod, did Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street.
We always wanted to go somewhere fresh and new. Sweeney Todd didn't hurt people's feelings. It was meant to thrill you. I'm much more interested in having an experience in the theater which is unlike the experience I'm having on the street.
In the opening number, having the rumbling music is very low, and I put it in as low a key as possible, this feeling. Right, and always with a slight crescendo. So there's always a little leaning in, as if something's about to happen and then doesn't. So the feeling is of lifting the voice a little bit and then dropping them, lifting, dropping. That may seem subtleties that nobody gets, but it creates a mood. And I don't think anybody would argue that the opening moments of this play are very creepy indeed.
Attend the tale of Sweeney Todd. He served a dark and a vengeful God. What happened then? Well, that's the play, and he wouldn't want us to give it away. Not Sweeney. Not Sweeney Todd. The demon barber of Fleet Street.
Sweeney Todd is the grisly tale of a barber falsely convicted of a crime who returns to London seeking revenge. His victims' bodies are disposed of by cooking them into tasty meat pies.
Here we are, dear, hot out of the oven.
This is Angela Lansbury, who starred in the original version of Sweeney Todd on Broadway, and she has been the voice of Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast. She was in Bedknobs and Broomsticks. She was in a TV show called Murder, She Wrote, and dozens and dozens and dozens of other shows and voices of characters in cartoons.
The last line of the first act of Bond's play says they fall into each other's arms with laughter. And I thought, gee, that's a moment to sing about. And what are they laughing at? And then I thought, they're laughing at the prospect of what people will taste like.
This one might be a bit stringy, but then of course it's a fiddle player.
No, this isn't fiddle player. It's piccolo player.
How can you tell?
It's piping hot.
Sondheim's dark vision had moved the musical to where an audience could identify with a tale of murder and cannibalism. As the score's intertwined arias reach their climax, Sweeney Todd enacts his vengeance on society.
And if you're beautiful, what then? With yellow hair like wheat, I think we shall not meet.
Revenge is universal, whether people will admit it or not. And that's what the piece is about. It's about revenge. And I think the audience senses that, and they identify with Sweeney Todd.
Goodbye, Joanna.
This is one of the key parts of the show where the bodies slide down from the barber chair that turns into a slide into Mrs. Lovett's meat pie shop next door, where she grinds them up and makes them into meat pies. And the irony of the whole story is that people absolutely love the meat pies and want more and more of them.
You're gone and yet you're mine. I'm fine, Joanna. I'm fine.
Musicals have always tried to keep the dark side of the culture out of the frame. Sondheim was the first person to try to sing about that darkness. The ultimate expression of that in his work would be Sweeney Todd, which is, I think, a masterpiece.
From tragic knife fights in West Side Story to vengeful throat-slitting in Sweeney Todd, the Sondheim-Prince collaborations stood at the apex of a period that redefined the musical tradition on Broadway. By the end of the 1970s, inspired by the success of the chorus line, Broadway became the centerpiece of a new public relations campaign designed to attract tourists to New York.
There's only one Broadway. It's in New York.
This I Love New York theme song has been a staple for the Big Apple since the late 1970s and is still used today in commercials.
Increasingly, the tourist trade has dominated Broadway, favoring revivals and nostalgic entertainment. But the most successful shows in the years to come, in fact, the most successful in Broadway history, came from theaters in London, where a young British producer found a way to make the American musical a truly international phenomenon.
I love New York at night. You never know who might appear.
I love New York.